Number 1. Randy Stair. If you had walked past Randy Stair on any given night in Eaton Township, Pennsylvania, you would not have looked twice. He was 24 years old, quiet, and by every account from the people who worked with him, unremarkable. He had been stocking shelves at the Weiss Market's supermarket for 7 years. He showed up, did his job, and kept himself. Nobody at that store had any reason to believe he was capable of what he was about to do. But Randy Stair was living two lives, and only one of them was visible. Randy grew up in Dallas, Pennsylvania, living with his parents and his brother. By his own account, written in documents he left behind, he was a shy and introverted child who struggled whenever he was separated from his family. As a kid, he became completely absorbed by television, film, music, and animation, and he dreamed of creating those kinds of things himself. That dream followed him into adulthood, and it eventually became the center of his entire identity. In 2008, as a teenager, Randy started a YouTube channel called Pioneers Productions. In the early days, it was mostly short comedic sketches, light and a little awkward, the kind of content plenty of teenagers were making at the time. He even got a small moment of recognition when he was featured by the YouTuber Ray Johnson. In his videos from that era, Randy often thanked his small but loyal following, and at one point he said that YouTube itself had helped keep him out of depression. For a while, it seemed like his channel was a positive outlet. That changed around 2014. Citing his ongoing depression, Randy shifted the entire direction of his online work and launched an animated series called Ember's Ghost Squad. The project was inspired by a character named Ember McLean from a Nickelodeon show Danny Phantom, a character Randy became fixated on and eventually wove into a fictional universe of his own making, one he began to treat as more than fiction. He built out a whole team of collaborators, animators, and voice actors to help him produce this series, which centered around a cast of mostly female characters. He created 9 separate Twitter accounts for these characters and had them interact with each other online as if they were real people with their own lives. Alongside YouTube and Twitter, he maintained accounts on Facebook, Bandcamp, Instagram, and DeviantArt, and there was even a fan wiki dedicated to the series. In the background of all of this, he was also spending time in online forums built around discussion of the Columbine High School massacre. The turning point in Randy's mental state seems to trace back to when he learned that Ember McLean, the character he had built so much of his identity around, had died in a fire in the original show's storyline. In one of his own videos, Randy claimed that Ember wanted him to kill because her fictional ghost squad needed more souls. Around 2012 and 2013, several people he knew personally passed away, and that loss sent him into a deeper depression, one that came with increasingly persistent thoughts about death. As he pulled further away from the people around him, Randy developed a belief that he could not age past his 20s, and his isolation only deepened from there. By his own writings, Randy felt disconnected from the real world. He believed he did not belong in it, and he believed that the characters from his own animated series were, in some sense, real. He talked about wanting to be reunited with one particular character, a character named Mackenzie West, whom he described as his soulmate. As he sank deeper into the fictional universe he had built, he developed a growing hatred toward humanity in general, and he began describing, in explicit terms, a desire to kill as many people as possible. Randy also struggled privately with his gender identity. He described himself as a female soul that had been placed inside a male body, and he expressed a desire to undergo gender-affirming surgery. In one video meant for his parents, he admitted that he had been secretly cross-dressing on the days when his mother, father, and brother were out of the house. In his own animated series, he voiced a character named Andrew Blaze, a self-insert character who identified as female despite having a traditionally masculine name. Randy later stated that this character represented his true self, which is why so much of his later online activity, including his final videos, was signed under the name Andrew Blaze rather than his own. In the months leading up to the shooting, the warning signs were there, but they were buried inside a mountain of content that most people simply scrolled past. On May 1st, 2017, Randy posted online that he was planning to do something massive on June 9th, the 9th anniversary of his YouTube channel. On May 11th, he uploaded a video showing off 2 pistol grip pump action shotguns, which he had personally nicknamed Mackenzie and Rachel, names tied directly back to his fictional universe. In the weeks after that video, he documented himself practicing at a shooting range, touring the inside of the Weiss Market store where he worked, and even filming a coin flip that he used to help decide where the attack would ultimately take place. In his own writings, he described the people he intended to kill as part of what he called a soul contract. Something he believed he needed to fulfill in order to cross over into the fictional world he had created for himself. On the evening of June 7, 2017, just hours before the attack, Randy uploaded what would become his final video, titled The Westboro High Massacre, Goodbye. In it, he expressed frustration toward people in his life, loaded his shotguns on camera, used one for target practice, and made disturbing gestures toward the weapon itself. He praised Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, the two perpetrators of the Columbine High School massacre, by name, and the video included an animated sequence depicting himself and his own fictional characters as school shooters. Alongside that video, Randy posted links to a large collection of additional files on a file-sharing site. This included a series of recordings labeled as suicide tapes, personal journal entries, a written document listing all of his various online accounts, and a physical notebook on which he had scrawled references to other mass casualty events, including Sandy Hook, September 11th, and the Oklahoma City bombing. At 12:37 in the morning, just before the shooting began, he sent a text message to his sleeping mother that functioned as a suicide note. Randy arrived for his shift at Weiss Markets that night at around 11 p.m. and worked normally for close to an hour and 40 minutes, all while quietly using pallets and other store items to block several of the building's emergency exits. Surveillance footage later showed him stepping outside to further block one of the emergency exits using his own car. After doing that, he retrieved two shotguns that had been hidden in a duffel bag inside the vehicle, walked back into the store, and locked the door behind him. He then moved through the store and shot three of his co-workers. Victoria Brong, 25 years old, an assistant tag manager, was shot 4 times. Brian Hayes, 47 years old, the night manager and a United States Navy veteran, was shot 5 times. Terry Lee Sterling, 63 years old, a shop assistant, was shot twice. Randy encountered a 4th co-worker, Kristen Newell, and for reasons that remain unclear, chose to spare her. He continued firing throughout the store's aisles and at several propane tanks, apparently hoping to explode, though none of them did. While Randy was distracted, Kristen managed to escape the building and call 911. While she was still on the phone with emergency dispatchers, Randy Stair turned one of the shotguns on himself. In total, 59 rounds had been fired that night, all of them from a single one of the 2 weapons he had brought with him. In the aftermath, state police searched Randy's home and recovered shotgun cartridges, protective shooting equipment, a gun stock and its accompanying manual, 2 personal notebooks, various drawings, discs, hard drives, a flash drive, a computer, and a camera. Investigators spent a significant amount of time working through his online footprint in an attempt to understand exactly what had driven him to this point. One woman who had voiced a character in Randy's animated series told a local news outlet that she received an email from him less than an hour before the shooting began, a message that thanked her personally and attempted to explain the reason behind everything he had created. She said that nothing about his prior behavior had given her any indication of what he was capable of. Officials who reviewed the case afterward were candid about what they believed was really behind it. The local district attorney described it as a mental health situation that had been allowed to spiral completely out of control and stated plainly that Randy's untreated mental health struggles were the driving force behind the attack. A psychiatrist who studied the case afterward noted that many young perpetrators like Randy, who ultimately took their own lives, share a common trait, an inability to separate fiction from reality. Another expert involved in trauma services suggested that Randy's belief that no one around him understood or acknowledged his struggle with gender dysphoria contributed to a desire for a kind of revenge against the world. Writers who later investigated the case pointed out that Randy had been careful never to explicitly announce his plans in a way that would have triggered intervention, even while hinting constantly that something big was coming. One journalist noted that the sheer volume and structure of the files Randy left behind resembled something closer to a press kit than a simple suicide note, seemingly built with the expectation that his content would be downloaded and spread by media outlets after his death. Because of that, several outlets made the deliberate choice not to link to or promote that material, out of concern that doing so would only encourage future copycat attacks. There was also criticism directed at YouTube and Twitter for not removing Randy's accounts and content quickly enough after the attack took place, allowing some of it to continue spreading in the days that followed. The shooting drew both local and national attention almost immediately. On the evening of the attack, hundreds of community members gathered outside the Wyoming County Courthouse for a vigil, with several local pastors in attendance to support grieving families. The sister-in-law of victim Brian Hayes organized a fundraiser to help cover immediate expenses for the family. And number 2, Daniel Sancho Broncolo. Daniel Sancho was born into a life most people would consider enviable. His father, Rodolfo Sancho, and his mother, Sylvia Broncolo, were both established actors in Spain, giving Daniel a level of visibility and privilege from the very beginning of his life. He grew up in Madrid and eventually built his own identity separate from his parents, turning a passion for cooking into a career as a YouTube chef. Online, he cultivated the image of a stylish, carefree young man with a growing platform built around food, travel, and lifestyle content. That polished public image would eventually collide, in the most brutal way imaginable, with a private relationship he shared with a man named Edwin Arrieta. Edwin Arrieta Arteaga was a 44-year-old plastic surgeon from Colombia. He came from a far more modest background than Daniel, but the two men had known each other for some time and had traveled together on more than one occasion. The exact nature of their relationship, whether it was a friendship, a business partnership, a romantic connection, or some combination of all three, became a subject of intense debate in the media and was scrutinized in detail during the eventual trial. What is not in dispute is how their final trip together ended. In late July of 2023, Daniel and Edwin both traveled to Thailand, each having visited the country separately in the past. Edwin arrived on the island of Koh Phangan first, with Daniel following shortly after. What happened between them over the following days was later pieced together by Thai investigators using surveillance footage, hotel records, and Daniel's own statements to police. On August 2nd, 2023, Daniel walked into a police station on Koh Phangan and told officers that he'd killed Edwin. What followed shocked even experienced investigators. Daniel described a violent confrontation that had taken place inside the bungalow the two men had rented together. In the aftermath of that confrontation, Edwin's remains were discovered in multiple separate locations, including inside trash bags left at a landfill, along with personal belongings that had been discarded around the area. Investigators determined that the killing itself and the disposal of the body afterward had been intentional and carried out in a methodical way rather than as a sudden, chaotic act. Thai police moved quickly once the case became public. They gathered security camera footage from local shops showing Daniel purchasing items, including knives, cleaning supplies, and trash bags in the period surrounding Edwin's death. Investigators also pulled digital evidence directly from Daniel's phone and used local surveillance systems to trace his movements throughout the island in the days before and after the killing. He was taken into custody almost immediately after his confession, and investigators publicly stated that the evidence pointed toward planning rather than a spontaneous, impulsive act. The case became an enormous media event almost overnight, drawing intense coverage across Spain, Colombia, and Thailand simultaneously. Spanish outlets in particular tracked every development closely. Daniel's parents traveled to Thailand to be near him, but largely avoided speaking publicly about the case. Edwin's family, meanwhile, spoke out forcefully, describing a man who had trusted Daniel completely and had no idea he was in any kind of danger. Investigators who interacted with Daniel after his arrest noted that he displayed very little visible emotion during the process. Court documents that surfaced later revealed that while Daniel admitted to killing Edwin, he disputed the prosecution's characterization of the act as premeditated. As the legal process moved forward, Thai authorities formally charged him with premeditated killing and concealment of a body, charges that under Thai law carry penalties ranging anywhere from life imprisonment to death. Prosecutors pushed aggressively for the harshest possible sentence, arguing that Daniel's actions demonstrated clear intent and a disturbing level of brutality. Daniel's defense team argued that the situation had escalated during what began as a personal dispute, suggesting elements of fear and self-defense, but the physical and digital evidence collected by investigators consistently pointed toward deliberate preparation rather than a spontaneous act of self-protection. The trial was held at the Koh Samui Provincial Court and drew close international media attention throughout its duration. Representatives for Edwin's family attended the hearings and publicly called for the maximum possible punishment. Spanish government officials made a point of stating that they would not interfere in the proceedings, acknowledging that the case fell entirely under Thai jurisdiction. Over the course of the trial, prosecutors laid out the full sequence of events in detail, from the killing itself to the disposal of Edwin's remains across multiple locations, supported by physical and digital evidence that Daniel's defense struggled to meaningfully counter. In August of 2024, the court delivered its verdict. Daniel was convicted of premeditated killing, and while he had originally avoided pleading guilty to murder itself, he had pleaded guilty to the dismemberment of Edwin's body. He was ultimately sentenced to death, a sentence that was subsequently commuted to life in prison, an outcome the court attributed in part to his partial cooperation with investigators and his confession. Even with that reduction, the court made clear in its ruling that it viewed the crime as severe and entirely inexcusable. Daniel was sent to Bang Kwang Central Prison, one of Thailand's highest security facilities, known for housing violent offenders under strict, long-term conditions. As of the most recent reporting, Daniel's legal team has discussed the possibility of an appeal or a reduced sentence, though Thai legal procedures place significant limits on those options. There has also been discussion of a potential prisoner transfer agreement that could eventually allow Daniel to serve his sentence in Spain, but any such process would take years to complete and is far from guaranteed. Public reaction in Spain has remained deeply divided between disbelief and outright condemnation. Many people who had once followed Daniel's cooking videos or lifestyle content expressed genuine shock that someone with his apparent success and privilege could be capable of a crime like this. Others viewed the case as a reflection of a broader reality of the digital age. The fact that a person can build an entirely curated public life online while hiding a completely different reality behind the scenes. For Edwin's family, none of the conversation around influencers or online personas mattered. What mattered to them was that they had lost a kind man with a strong career, someone who had provided for his family and traveled frequently for work, in a foreign country far from everyone who loved him. The case eventually became the subject of a documentary series titled A Recipe for Murder, produced for the streaming platform Sky Showtime and directed by Jose Gomez, who was previously known for his work on a documentary covering the 2004 Madrid train bombings. The series, released in February of 2025, was built around interviews with members of Edwin's family, including his parents and sister, as well as legal representatives from both sides of the case and journalists who had covered the story extensively. The director described the project as an exploration of privilege, entitlement, and an increasingly blurred line between journalism and entertainment in how cases like this one get covered by the public. With Daniel Sancho Broncolo, the gap between a carefully curated public identity and a private, hidden reality became violently and permanently clear. A life built around cameras, cooking, and curated moments online ended not because of an accident, but because of a decision that no amount of fame, family status, or online following could undo. Number 3, Ali Abdulbin. To millions of people online, Ali Abdulbin was known simply as Jin Kid, a TikTok creator whose impressions, particularly his portrayal of Tony Montana from the film Scarface, had earned him a massive following. His comedic timing and sharp impersonations made him one of the more recognizable faces in that corner of the internet. But behind that persona, Ali's personal life was falling apart in ways that would eventually turn into one of the more devastating creator-involved crimes in recent memory. Ali Abdulbin was born in Staten Island and later served in the United States Air Force. While stationed in Japan, he met a woman named Anna, who was originally from the Philippines. After leaving the military, reportedly following a physical altercation involving one of Anna's friends, the couple relocated to be near Ali's family in Bristow, Virginia, after learning that they were expecting a child together. They married in 2017. It was the following year that Ali's online career truly took off, as he began posting impersonation videos under the name Jin Kid. His Scarface-based content in particular caught fire, eventually helping him build an audience close to 1 million followers. As his online fame grew, the couple relocated again, this time to San Diego, where their family life and Ali's public persona increasingly moved in opposite directions. According to testimony and reporting on the case, Anna's isolation deepened as Ali's online fame grew, and at the same time Ali's cocaine addiction escalated, something he documented, at least in part, on his own social media. By October 2021, the marriage had reached a breaking point. Anna asked Ali to move out of their shared apartment. Following repeated conflict between them, he relocated to a hotel but did not fully accept that the relationship was ending. According to investigators, he remained consumed by paranoid suspicions that Anna might be seeing someone else. Rather than dealing with the separation through more conventional means, Ali began secretly monitoring her. He returned to the apartment while Anna was away and made a copy of the key, and he allegedly installed a listening application on a tablet belonging to their young daughter, using it to eavesdrop on conversations happening inside the home. On October 21st, 2021, Ali reportedly heard a man's voice coming through that audio feed. The voice belonged to Rayburn Cardenas Barron, a friend of Anna's. According to prosecutors, this moment triggered the final, fatal chain of events. Ali drove to the apartment building, and security footage captured him entering the elevator and heading up. Once inside the unit, prosecutors said there was no argument and no attempt at conversation. He was armed, and within moments, both Anna and Rayburn were shot at close range inside the apartment. Authorities later stated that the nature of the wounds indicated a clear intent to kill. After leaving the scene, Ali picked up his 5-year-old daughter from school. During that same window of time, he reportedly called his mother and confessed to what he had done. He also called 911 himself, initially telling the dispatcher only that he found the 2 victims dead, rather than admitting responsibility outright. Police were separately dispatched to the apartment after a 911 call reported violence at the location. When officers arrived, they found both Anna and Rayburn unresponsive and pronounced dead at the scene. Ali was arrested later, that same day, on a San Diego freeway, without further incident. Court testimony would later reveal that shortly before being taken into custody, he told his young daughter that he had hurt her mother. News of the arrest spread rapidly, driven in large part by Ali's existing online fame. The persona that his followers had come to recognize, the confident, charismatic impersonator, stood in stark contrast to the man described in the criminal case that followed. During pretrial proceedings, prosecutors argued forcefully that the killings had been premeditated, pointing to the duplicated key, the surveillance app installed on the child's tablet, and the speed and precision with which Ali had entered the apartment and begun shooting. Ali pleaded not guilty. His defense argued that he had been emotionally unstable and overwhelmed in the moment, and during his own testimony, he stated that he had essentially snapped upon seeing his wife with another man, describing a loss of control over his own actions in that instant. Prosecutors, however, continued to emphasize the deliberate, calculated nature of everything that had led up to that moment. During the trial, Ali took the stand in his own defense across nearly 3 full days of testimony. He spoke about his mental health struggles, childhood trauma tied to alleged abuse, and an escalating cocaine addiction, all of which his defense argued had shaped his mindset leading up to the shooting. He testified that after the couple moved to San Diego, a rift had formed between himself and Anna, connected to a drug-influenced social lifestyle. They had both become part of one that included Anna's circle of friends, Rayburn among them. He said their presence in his marriage had, in his words, started changing Anna, and that his own undiagnosed mental health issues combined with his growing drug use only made an already difficult situation worse. Prosecutors painted a very different picture, describing Ali as jealous, controlling, and violent, with a documented pattern of physical and emotional abuse toward his wife throughout their marriage. Ali himself admitted, under testimony, that he had physically struck and pushed Anna on prior occasions in the months leading up to the killings, and he acknowledged that he had actively discouraged her from contacting police or pursuing a restraining order in connection with those earlier incidents. Friends of Anna's later told investigators that she had expressed genuine fear of Ali and believed his anger was reaching a dangerous point well before the shooting occurred. The court denied Ali bail throughout the proceedings, and he reportedly showed little visible emotion during most of his pretrial appearances. His young daughter, too young to fully understand what had happened, was placed in the care of relatives. Because the crime occurred in California, prosecutors pursued 2 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstance allegations, a legal framework that opened the door to a potential sentence of life without the possibility of parole. Prosecutors described the killings as executions carried out inside the privacy of a home, deliberately rejecting any characterization of the act as a spontaneous crime of passion. In May of 2024, following his extended testimony, the case moved toward its conclusion. Ali was ultimately found guilty on both counts of first-degree murder. On September 6, 2024, a San Diego judge sentenced him to 2 consecutive life sentences. During the sentencing hearing, Ali reportedly had several profanity-laced outbursts, including one exchange that escalated into a shouting match with Anna's sister as she read her victim impact statement to the court. Ali told the court that he believed everyone deserved the possibility of parole because people have the capacity to change, and he cited what he described as an untreated severe mental illness combined with a crippling cocaine addiction as the underlying causes of what he called a drug-induced psychosis that led to the killings. The presiding judge rejected the defense's framing of the killings as a heat of passion act, pointing specifically to the spyware installed on the child's tablet, the duplicated apartment key, and the fact that Ali had begun recording audio just before carrying out what the judge directly described as a willful, deliberate, premeditated, and cold-blooded double murder. The judge went further, noting the apparent overlap between Ali's online persona as an impersonator of Scarface's central character and the way he seemed to carry out the killings themselves, suggesting that Ali appeared to briefly become that same cold, remorseless character in the moment he committed the crime. The judge added that any tears Ali had shed throughout the trial had been, in his assessment, shed entirely for himself. Ali Abdulbin's case later became the subject of a documentary titled TikTok Star Murders, produced for the Peacock streaming platform, bringing renewed public attention to the enormous gap between a version of Ali his millions of followers thought they knew and a man who was ultimately convicted of murdering his wife and her friend in cold blood. Number 4. Stanislav Reshetniak. Known online as Stas Reflay, Stanislav Reshetniak was a Russian internet personality and live streamer whose content revolved around a disturbing and specifically Russian online phenomenon known as trash streaming, in which creators perform degrading, dangerous, or outright violent acts on camera in exchange for cash donations from viewers watching in real time. What began as shock value entertainment for an online audience would eventually end in the death of his girlfriend, broadcast live to thousands of people who could do nothing but watch. Stas lived with his girlfriend, 28-year-old Valentina Grigorieva, in a rented home in Ivanovka, near Moscow. Valentina occasionally appeared on his streams, sometimes in the background, and sometimes as a direct participant in the reckless dares his viewers paid him to carry out. Some viewers had already begun to notice the tone Stas used when speaking to her during broadcasts, but for much of his audience, the line between staged entertainment and genuine cruelty had become difficult to distinguish until it wasn't anymore. On December 2nd, 2020, Stas was broadcasting live from the home the couple shared. He had been drinking heavily throughout the stream and was in the middle of an escalating argument with Valentina. At some point during the broadcast, in exchange for cash tips from his audience, he forced her outside onto the balcony in sub-zero winter temperatures, wearing only her underwear. Viewers watched as she remained outside in the freezing cold for an extended period, and some of them, rather than expressing concern, actually sent paid messages encouraging Stas to continue. When Stas eventually brought Valentina back inside, she was unconscious. Rather than immediately ending the stream and seeking emergency help, he kept the camera running, continuing to broadcast for close to 2 hours while attempting to revive her, dragging her body across the floor, and at one point weeping openly on camera while telling his audience that she wasn't breathing. He touched her skin and commented on how cold it felt, all while continuing to narrate the unfolding situation for the people still watching live. Some viewers in the chat began urging him to call an ambulance immediately, while others continued to treat the entire situation as part of performance. Eventually, emergency services were called to the home. When paramedics arrived, they pronounced Valentina dead at the scene. Initial reports attributed her death to hypothermia and prolonged exposure to the cold. A subsequent post-mortem examination, however, told a different story. Medical examiners determined that Valentina had actually died from traumatic brain injury, along with cerebral hemorrhage and multiple bruises found across her body. Stas was detained by Russian authorities shortly after her death, and prosecutors did not treat the case as a tragic accident. Instead, they built their case around negligence, endangerment, and a documented pattern of abusive behavior. Investigators reviewed archive footage from earlier broadcasts, along with social media activity and testimony from viewers who described previous instances of aggression and physical intimidation on Stas's streams. Stas himself later admitted to hitting Valentina on the head multiple times on the day that she died. The trial took place at the Rumensky City Court near Moscow. During the proceedings, Stas's defense attempted to characterize the incident as something that had escalated unexpectedly, downplaying any suggestion of intent. Prosecutors countered by pointing directly to the fact that Stas had locked Valentina outside in genuinely dangerous winter conditions and had continued streaming rather than intervening to help her, framing his choices not as a spontaneous mistake, but as part of an ongoing pattern shaped by the demands and incentives of his streaming career. In April of 2021, the court delivered its verdict. Stanislav Reshetniak was found guilty of intentional infliction of grievous bodily harm, resulting in death by negligence, a legal classification roughly equivalent to involuntary manslaughter. He was sentenced to 6 years in a maximum security prison colony. For Valentina's family, there was no real sense of closure, only the knowledge that her final hours had been witnessed live by strangers scattered across the internet, almost none of whom had any ability to actually help her. The case sent shockwaves far beyond Russia's borders and placed intense scrutiny on the broader trash streaming trend, an online culture built around monetized humiliation, violence, and escalating dares. Other high-profile incidents connected to the same trend had already drawn attention in the years before Valentina's death, including cases of Russian streamers burying a homeless man alive on camera and physically assaulting a woman during a broadcast. In the wake of Valentina's death specifically, YouTube moved to ban Stas's account and pledged to more actively remove similar content from its platform going forward. Russian lawmakers responded as well, with the Speaker of the country's lower house of parliament publicly stating that legislative action was necessary, and discussions began around a bill that would impose strict penalties, including potential jail time, on creators who broadcast real violence for profit. What makes this case particularly unsettling is that it did not happen behind closed doors, hidden from view. It played out step by step in front of a live audience, with strangers watching a real person suffer in real time. Yet the very structure of that online space, the anonymity, the incentive of paid donations, and the general desensitization that comes with treating a live stream as pure entertainment, allowed the situation to continue for far longer than it ever should have. Valentina never chose to have her final night broadcast to strangers. She was simply a woman inside her own home with someone she was supposed to be able to trust, and the audience watching that night became silent witnesses to the last hours of her life. Today, Stas remains incarcerated, and his channels have either been removed or left abandoned, though footage and details from the case continue to circulate in news coverage and academic discussions of online exploitation. Number 5, Manuel Ruiz. Manuel Ruiz, known online as Sin City Manny, was not a household name outside of the Las Vegas content creation scene, but within that community, he was a familiar face. He built his online identity around nightlife, casinos, travel, and the general fast-paced lifestyle associated with creators trying to build something in Nevada's entertainment world. That identity was permanently overshadowed in the summer of 2025, when his name became connected to a shooting that left 2 fellow creators dead on one of the busiest stretches of the Las Vegas Strip. Manuel operated within a tight circle of Las Vegas-based creators. Many of them focus on lifestyle, music, and nightlife content, all of them chasing a version of the same goal, building an audience and turning that following into a career. Among the people in that circle were Rodney Finley, known online as Finny the Legend, and his wife, Tanisha Finley. According to police, the relationship between Manuel and the Finleys had been shaped by a long-standing and increasingly volatile online dispute, one that reportedly involved social media criticism and disagreements over copyright issues between the two parties. On June 8, 2025, that tension turned fatal. The shooting took place late at night near the Bellagio fountains, one of the most recognizable and heavily trafficked locations on the entire Strip, and it was captured on a live video stream as it happened. According to authorities, Manuel fired multiple rounds, resulting in immediate deaths of both Rodney and Tanisha Finley. Las Vegas Metropolitan Police confirmed that the shooting stemmed directly from the ongoing feud between the two sides. The following morning, rather than remaining at large, Manuel turned himself in at a police station in Henderson, Nevada. A Clark County grand jury subsequently indicted Manuel on 2 felony counts of open murder involving the use of a deadly weapon. He pleaded not guilty to the charges. His defense has argued that he acted in self-defense, pointing to fear stemming from a previous altercation he claimed to have had with Rodney Finley prior to the shooting. Despite that argument, a judge denied his request for bail, which had been proposed at $100,000 alongside electronic monitoring, ruling that prosecutors had presented exceptionally strong evidence against him. As a result, Manuel has remained in custody without bail throughout the pretrial process. The Clark County District Attorney's Office has taken the case further than a standard murder charge, filing formal intent to seek the death penalty against Manuel. In their court filings, prosecutors pointed to specific aggravating factors under Nevada law, most notably the fact that the case involved multiple victims, and the fact that the shooting took place in an extremely crowded, high-traffic tourist area, creating what prosecutors described as a great risk of death to bystanders who had absolutely nothing to do with the underlying dispute. Under Nevada law, prosecutors are required to establish the existence of specific aggravating circumstances in order for a defendant to become eligible for capital punishment, and officials argue that both of those conditions have clearly been met in this case. As of the most recent reporting, Manuel's jury trial has been scheduled, with proceedings expected later in the year. If he is convicted on both counts without any form of plea agreement being reached beforehand, his realistic chances of ever being released would be effectively non-existent, whether through a life sentence or the possibility of execution. For the families of Rodney and Tanisha Finley, the loss isn't described in deeply personal terms. Both were described as young creators with real plans, ongoing projects, and communities they built both online and in person. They were not massive global celebrities, but they were real people with real audiences who trusted and supported them. For their loved ones, the pain of the loss is made even sharper by the fact that the person responsible came from within their own circle. A fellow creator they had filmed with, appeared alongside, and interacted with at industry events, rather than a stranger with no connection to their world at all. The case has understandably made many smaller creators in similar online communities reconsider who they choose to associate with, and how quickly digital relationships and online disputes can spill over into real, offline violence with permanent, irreversible consequences. Number 6, Trevor Hypeman. To an audience of close to 900,000 subscribers, Trevor Hypeman, known online as McSkillet, represented a kind of success story that felt almost unbelievable for someone still in his teenage years. Trevor built his channel around Counter-Strike Global Offensive, the popular tactical shooter, and specifically around the game's virtual cosmetic items, known as skins. He became known within that community as something close to royalty, earning the nickname King of Skins for his work designing, trading, and showcasing rare digital items, and he even ran his own trade-related websites, including one called CSGO Exchange. That success translated into real-world wealth at a remarkably young age, and Trevor used it to purchase a black 2014 McLaren 650S, a supercar capable of speeds well over 200 miles per hour, a vehicle he prominently featured throughout his content. Trevor grew up in San Diego, California, and attended La Jolla Country Day School. He had started his YouTube channel as a teenager, and it grew steadily as his reputation within the CSGO trading and gambling scene expanded. But that same industry, the unregulated third-party skin gambling and trading ecosystem that had built much of his fortune, became the source of his downfall as well. In early 2018, Valve Corporation, the developer behind Counter-Strike, began cracking down heavily on unauthorized gambling and trading platforms connected to the game. As part of that crackdown, Trevor's accounts were officially trade banned, effectively freezing an inventory of digital items that was estimated to be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Following that ban, Trevor stopped uploading new content to his channel almost entirely. According to people close to him, he began struggling with severe depression, paranoia, and what were described as manic mental health episodes in the months that followed. By August of 2018, witnesses were reporting incidents involving reckless driving, and there were increasingly visible signs of emotional and mental strain. He had also reportedly been involved in an incident of property damage connected to his former school and had been barred from returning to the campus as a result. People who knew him described his behavior during this period as increasingly unpredictable, though no one around him anticipated what was coming next. On the afternoon of August 23, 2018, Trevor was involved in an earlier incident at Ashley Falls Elementary School in Carmel Valley, where he drove his vehicle directly through a closed side gate, breaking a window in the process. No one was injured in that incident. A short time later, at approximately 4:30 in the afternoon, Trevor got behind the wheel of his black McLaren and entered Interstate 805 in San Diego County, driving southbound while traveling in the wrong direction against oncoming northbound traffic in the carpool lanes. Witnesses told investigators that he was traveling at speeds exceeding 100 miles per hour at the time. Some motorists managed to swerve out of the way in time. Others could not. Trevor's McLaren collided head-on with a Hyundai SUV being driven by 43-year-old Aileen Pizarro, who had her 12-year-old daughter, Ariana, in the vehicle with her. The impact caused an explosive fire, and all three people involved, Trevor, Aileen, and Ariana, were killed. The crash also triggered a larger pileup involving several additional vehicles as other drivers slammed on their brakes trying to avoid the wreckage, leaving multiple people injured in the process. The highway patrol officer who spoke to media afterward noted that the sheer volume of public interest in the crash, driven almost entirely by Trevor's online fame, was something his department had rarely experienced, with calls coming in from across the country and even internationally. The investigation that followed confirmed some of the more troubling details surrounding the crash. Authorities found no evidence that Trevor had attempted to brake before the collision, and they concluded that his actions reflected a complete disregard for the safety of everyone else on that highway. Because Trevor did not survive the crash, investigators were never able to interview him directly, but the pattern of erratic driving reported by witnesses in the lead-up to the collision, combined with the wrong way, high-speed nature of the crash itself, made his level of impairment or intent only part of a much larger picture. Perhaps the most disturbing detail to emerge came out later, through legal filings connected to a lawsuit the Pizarro family eventually brought against Trevor's estate and against local government entities. Those filings revealed that a psychiatrist had actually contacted police shortly before the crash occurred, specifically warning them that Trevor was in the middle of a severe psychological crisis and needed to be placed under an emergency psychiatric hold. In January of 2024, the city of San Diego agreed to pay a settlement of $6.125 million to the surviving members of the Pizarro family, a settlement connected directly to the police department's failure to properly intervene before the collision took place. The gaming community's reaction to the news was one of pure disbelief. For many of his followers, Trevor was still remembered as a confident young creator constantly showing off luxury cars and a success within the skins economy, and reconciling that image with the deaths of an innocent mother and her 12-year-old daughter felt almost impossible. In the aftermath, sponsors distanced themselves from his content, his channels went dormant, and the public conversation shifted almost entirely from admiration to mourning and, for many, anger. Aileen and Ariana Pizarro's surviving family members became vocal advocates for road safety and government accountability, turning their grief into public advocacy aimed at making sure the victims, not the driver, were remembered first. In the end, Trevor Hype Man's story is not really about fame or gaming or expensive cars. It is about how quickly recklessness, when amplified by speed, untreated mental illness, and a missed opportunity for intervention, can permanently destroy multiple families in a matter of seconds. The people who followed his videos only ever saw someone living fast. They never saw the crash coming, and by the time it happened, nothing could undo the damage it caused. Number 7. Ray Diaz. Ray Diaz, born Raymundo Diaz in Key West, Florida, built a career around image and physicality long before he became a recognizable name online. He began working as a model in New York City after booking a national commercial for Macy's, eventually signing with the Wilhelmina Modeling Agency and working campaigns for major brands including Calvin Klein, L'Oreal, Polo, and Reebok. He later studied acting at the William Esper Studio and went on to land recurring television roles, most notably playing Nicholas Reyes on the Hulu series East Los High, and later a role alongside comedian George Lopez on the TV Land series Lopez. As his profile grew, Ray transitioned heavily into social media, eventually building an audience of more than 2 million followers on Instagram and briefly becoming part of Jake Paul's YouTube collective known as Team 10 in 2017. He also worked as a trainer for a fitness app called FitPlan, building much of his online brand around fitness content, motivation, and a lifestyle image tied closely to discipline and success. But behind that curated image, people close to Ray began noticing behavior that didn't match the persona he presented publicly. The first serious warning sign came when a young girl appeared on live streams with him and described him as controlling and aggressive. Viewers who watched those broadcasts noted his tone and his temper, particularly in moments when the girl became visibly upset, rather than dismissing what they saw as simple online drama. Some viewers took the additional step of contacting authorities and Child Protective Services directly. Not long afterward, leaked videos began circulating that showed Ray shouting and behaving in a physically aggressive manner, further raising public alarm. The teenage girl involved in those clips had reportedly been spending time at his home, and she later told investigators that Ray had controlled her movements, dictated what she posted online, and worked to isolate her from the people around her. She also claimed that he had manipulated her into believing the two of them belonged together romantically. Friends and other witnesses who came forward described a dynamic that sounded far closer possession and control than any kind of legitimate mentorship. When police first became involved, Ray denied any wrongdoing, claiming that the leaked footage had been part of a staged act or had been taken out of context for social media purposes. Investigators did not accept that explanation. The Los Angeles Police Department opened an official investigation, and additional people began coming forward with their own accounts, many describing a consistent pattern of psychological and physical control connected to Ray's behavior. On July 13, 2019, Los Angeles police officers, working alongside the San Diego Police Department, arrested Ray Diaz at approximately 5 a.m. in San Diego. The arrest came a day after the LAPD publicly acknowledged that it was already aware of and actively looking into a number of accusations against him, following media coverage of leaked footage that appeared to show him verbally attacking a woman. Ray had responded to those earlier allegations on social media by calling them fake news. Following his arrest, his bail was set at $500,000. As the investigation progressed, authorities reviewed Ray's social media accounts and phone records, uncovering conversations that directly contradicted his earlier denials. That evidence reportedly included messages and voice recordings suggesting manipulation, intimidation, and active efforts to prevent victims from speaking to authorities. Witnesses told investigators that Ray had specifically warned them against contacting police and had threatened consequences if they attempted to leave the situation. As media coverage of the case intensified, the broader entertainment and influencer community quickly distanced itself from him. Brand partnerships were severed, his online accounts were closed down or abandoned entirely, and his public presence faded almost completely. Where he had once been known for fitness content and acting roles, he became known instead for the criminal allegations that ultimately ended his career. Prosecutors built their case around themes of coercion, grooming behavior, and violence, while his defense attempted to argue that the interactions in question had been exaggerated or misunderstood. Given the seriousness of the claims, combined with the recordings and witness statements that had been gathered, those defense arguments carried very little weight in the outcome of the case. Ray was ultimately convicted on charges tied to child endangerment, abuse, and sexual assault involving a teenager, in addition to a separate domestic violence arrest from 2018 connected to an altercation with partner. As a result of his conviction, he was placed under legal supervision with restrictions, including limitations on any contact with minors, and he was required to register as a sex offender in the state of California. For the people who had followed his fitness routines and motivational content, the contrast between the man they thought they knew and the man described his own case files was jarring. It served as a stark reminder just how completely a public figure can curate an image online, while an entirely different reality plays out behind closed doors. Today, Ray Diaz is no longer active in mainstream entertainment or in the creator space. His career effectively ended by the very allegations and convictions that followed him out of the public eye. Number 8. Austin Jones. Austin Henry Jones built his early career as an independent musician on YouTube, releasing his first material in 2007 and eventually writing his own original songs beginning in 2010. His content largely centered around a cappella covers of popular songs from bands like My Chemical Romance, Panic at the Disco, Fall Out Boy, and 21 Pilots. And he also released original music, including an EP in 2014 that reached number 12 on the iTunes pop chart, followed by a full-length album in 2016. Over the course of his career, Austin built a channel with roughly 540,000 subscribers and more than 20 million total video views, cultivating a public image that was clean, friendly, and specifically aimed at a young, largely teenage fan base. He toured, met fans in person at his shows, and presented himself as approachable and safe. That public image concealed a pattern of behavior that would eventually lead to a federal investigation and conviction. The first public signs of trouble surfaced in May of 2015, when an anonymous 15-year-old girl started an online petition attempting to have Austin removed from his planned appearance at the Vans Warped Tour, citing inappropriate messages he had reportedly sent to female fans as young as 13, in which he asked them to send videos of themselves twerking. That petition did not gather enough support to force any official action, but Austin ultimately withdrew from the tour on his own and addressed the allegations directly in a video uploaded to his channel. In that video, he admitted the messages were authentic and apologized for his actions, while denying that any nudity had been involved in the recordings or webcam conversations in question. At the time, no formal charges were filed, and Austin continued uploading content and touring as though the matter had been resolved. That changed in 2017. On June 9th of that year, a United States magistrate judge signed a search warrant for Austin's residence in Bloomingdale, Illinois. 3 days later, agents from Homeland Security Investigations executed that warrant. On the same day, Austin was arrested at O'Hare International Airport on 2 counts of producing child pornography, connected to separate incidents in 2016 and 2017. He consented to a search of his phone and signed a written consent form, and he was subsequently transported to Homeland Security Investigations offices, where he took part in a recorded interview after signing a written Miranda waiver. According to investigators, in each documented instance, Austin had persuaded an underage fan to record sexually explicit videos of herself, following specific directions that he had given her. At a court hearing held on June 15th, Austin was released from federal custody into house arrest under the supervision of his mother, after posting a bond of $100,000. As a condition of his release, he was ordered to avoid using the internet entirely while he awaited trial. Austin ultimately pleaded guilty to a single count of receipt of child pornography on February 1st, 2019. On May 3rd of that year, he was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. Following an additional court hearing in early May, he was granted permission to remain under house arrest until he was required to report to prison, which he ultimately did on June 28, 2019. As part of his sentence, he was also ordered to register as a sex offender and to remain under strict supervision following his eventual release. In the aftermath of his conviction, another YouTuber released a video citing additional evidence and raising questions about whether other individuals connected to the music and touring industry, including figures associated with the Vans Warped Tour and other venues, had played a role in overlooking or covering up Austin's behavior over the years. Following his conviction, his channel went silent. Previous collaborators cut ties with him entirely, and the largely positive public reputation he had built over the course of a decade collapsed almost overnight. Parents, longtime viewers, and fellow creators reacted with a mixture of shock and anger, coming to terms with the reality that the clean, approachable image he had presented online had, for years, concealed serious and ongoing misconduct. As of the most recent available records, Austin remains incarcerated at FCI Loretto, with an earliest possible release date listed as December 31st, 2027. His case has become a frequently cited example of how a carefully maintained public image can allow a person to gain access to and manipulate vulnerable young fans for an extended period of time before facing any real consequences. Number 9, Mike and Heather Martin. Known online first as Daddy05 and briefly afterward as Family05, Mike and Heather Martin built a YouTube channel around daily vlogging and prank videos centered on their blended family. The channel featured Mike, his first wife Rose, his second wife Heather, who also went by the online alias Mommy05, and the couple's 5 children Jake, Ryan, Emma, Cody, and Alex. Jake, Ryan, and Alex were Heather's children from a previous relationship, while Cody and Emma were Mike's children with his former girlfriend, Rose Hall. The channel, created in August of 2015, described itself simply as a family making videos for fun, and it grew steadily, eventually accumulating around 750,000 subscribers and more than 176 million total views before the videos were ultimately taken down. What started as fairly ordinary family vlogging gradually shifted into increasingly extreme prank content, much of it involving Mike encouraging the family's eldest child, Jake, to physically and psychologically target his younger siblings, often to the point of visible injury and real emotional distress. In one particularly disturbing video, Cody, the second youngest child, was shown being thrown through a doorway by Jake and then into a bookcase by Mike himself, leaving him with visible injuries to his face. In another video, Alex, the youngest child, was instructed by Mike to slap his sister Emma across the face after she failed to successfully perform a water bottle flip trick. Alex was never reprimanded for following that instruction, despite the fact that it left Emma visibly hurt and crying on camera. The channel's extreme content eventually caught the attention of American YouTuber and news commentator Philip DeFranco, who released a series of videos publicly criticizing the Martins' content, beginning with a video posted on April 17, 2017. DeFranco's coverage focused heavily on one specific video, in which invisible ink had been spilled inside the family's home, with Cody and Alex being falsely accused of causing the mess. In that footage, Cody could be seen crying and pleading hysterically after being screamed at and sworn at by his parents and accused of lying, while Alex was subjected to similar treatment. DeFranco's first video on the subject was widely credited by numerous news outlets with bringing mainstream attention to the channel's disturbing content, sparking broader public conversation around the ethics of monetizing children's real emotional distress for entertainment, a practice that has since become widely known as sharpening when discussed in a less extreme context. In the aftermath of that public backlash, Emma and Cody were removed from Mike and Heather's custody and returned to their biological mother, Rose Hall, who stated publicly that she had not seen the 2 children since 2014, after she said she had been misled into signing legal custody paperwork. Mike and Heather issued a public apology for their content, describing themselves as a loving, close-knit family, despite the footage that had already circulated showing otherwise. In August of 2017, prosecutors from the Frederick County Circuit Court filed formal criminal charges against Mike and Heather, with each of them facing 2 separate counts of neglect of a minor. On September 11, 2017, both Mike and Heather entered Alford pleas, a legal plea in which a defendant does not admit guilt but acknowledges that the prosecution likely has enough evidence to secure a conviction. They were sentenced to 5 years of supervised probation as a result. Rather than stepping away from content creation entirely, the couple attempted a rebrand under a new channel called Family05, created while they were still on probation. That new channel quickly reinstituted the same pattern of behavior toward their remaining children, and was terminated by YouTube on July 18, 2018, for violating the platform's community guidelines. In the wake of that termination, YouTube updated its policies to require that any content involving children comply with local child labor laws. Despite that second termination, Mike and Heather continued attempting to monetize their family story, briefly offering new content through a paid subscription on their own website, and continuing to stream on Twitch. By January of 2019, they had removed all the content from that website as well, releasing a statement describing their decision as part of an effort to heal from the events of 2017 and to step back from public attention for the sake of their family's well-being. That same year, however, Mike was accused of having uploaded a video in August of 2018 that featured Cody, a direct violation of the terms of his probation. Despite that violation, his supervised probation was ultimately reduced to probation before judgment rather than being revoked entirely. In November 2018, the couple's older children, Jake, Ryan, and Alex, launched their own YouTube channel, initially called the Martin Boys and later renamed the Martin Family, continuing to create content even as their parents' legal troubles played out in the background. That channel remained active for a period of time before it was eventually terminated as well for violating YouTube's terms of service. The case of Daddy05 became one of the first major, widely publicized examples of family vloggers facing genuine legal consequences for exploiting their own children on camera. It raised lasting questions about consent, ethics, and the use of children as a source of profit within family-focused online content. Questions that continue to shape conversations around family vlogging and children's digital privacy to this day. In the end, the Martins' pursuit of viral fame came at the direct cost of their children's emotional well-being, and ultimately cost them both their channel's income and, for a period of time, custody of 2 of their own kids. Closing: 10 different people, 10 completely different platforms, and 10 stories that all circle back to the same uncomfortable truth. A following is not the same thing as knowledge. A camera captures exactly what someone chooses to show it, and nothing more. Fans, subscribers, and viewers only ever see the version of a person that person decides to build, curated frame by frame, video by video, stream by stream. Behind almost every one of these cases, there were people close to the situation who saw fragments of the truth long before the rest of the world did. Co-workers, friends, family members, even viewers watching a live stream in real time. Almost every single time, those warning signs were either dismissed, ignored, or simply misunderstood until it was far too late to change what happened next. These cases are a reminder that public image and private reality are not the same thing, and that the space between the two is exactly where some of the most devastating stories in recent memory have quietly taken shape.